But like, that's actually what indigenous spirituality is. It's just living in a way where you're connected with your community, you're connected with the earth around you, and that's where the spiritual energy comes from. It's just living life in an intentional way.
Yeah.
But you're not spiritual.
Hello. Welcome back to Sankasa podcast. My name is Rowena Tenika. Call me what you want. And today I'm here with
Tanika Sam, call me what you want.
and we are here with Araba Ofori-Acquah, and she's a oh my
Sorry.
god, guys. Literally every single person. I'm so bad and so shit with names. They've been like, girl.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that
Really?
one before.
Acquah.
Ofori-Acquah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it ACQUAH?
Yeah.
Aqua.
Aqua, yeah.
Aqua.
Ikea is like like Amba,
AKUA.
Ifya, AKUA, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Araba Ofori-Acquah. She's a multidisciplinary artist. She's a DJ. She's a writer. She is into wellness. And today we're going to talk about her book. She actually got us a little prezi. And it has the Adinkra cards as well with it, the Oracle cards. And we're going to have a conversation with her all about her book. And I think it's really relevant because it's basically low-key what Sankasa is about. So like, I'm here for it. Yeah.
Nice.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it all. My name is Araba. I am a lot of things. But I think first and foremost, I think of myself as a healer. And that word comes with a lot of conceptions and weight and things. And it took me a long time to own that title, actually. But for me, what it means to be a healer is that I feel like my purpose here is to create spaces and create content and create communities that help people to heal themselves. So I do that through a few different things. I do it through writing. I do it through DJing. I do it through creating things like the Oracle deck. Basically anything that I do, I try to do in a way that it can help people heal and thrive. So yeah, that's me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Did
She's
I?
a healer.
Oh.
Yeah,
yeah.
basically I'm a healer.
So, you know, the first time I met you, do you remember the first time I met you?
Yeah, in Ali, right?
In Ali,
Yeah.
in Ali Bar.
Do you know, when I was on the way here, I was calling you and I realized I still have you saved as Jifa Ali. Like, I never change people's names because I always want to remember how I met them. And it just made me laugh. Like, oh, yeah.
It's so basically I was on a date or whatever and it wasn't going great. And this was like, maybe when I like had first moved to Ghana, I think within
Yeah,
like
it
the
was
first
new.
like couple of months of moving to Ghana. And it was a date, it wasn't great. And I think you were maybe on a date
that wasn't going
I was just like dancing and you were like vibes and we're like, oh my god, you like, and we started chatting.
Yeah,
and it was great.
The dates.
We literally ditched the dates. And it was great. And I think like when I heard about your book, like because it came out like maybe a year or a couple of years after, and I was like, oh my god, this is so prevalent and relevant because it's like what like actually the journey it's like and what we're going through in terms of not just like the physical move, which is like something you talk about, but also like the emotional, spiritual, like the consciousness it takes to like go through that journey and moving. So like tell me what that's like in like your own words, because like obviously you're writing a book,
but so the book is called Return to Source, and I think just that phrase for me, like there's so many different returns that you have to go not have to, but that you go through as a Black person who is rediscovering yourself outside of the colonial concepts. So I think, first of all, of course, there's the physical return for people in the diaspora coming back to Ghana or any other country, but not even necessarily coming back to Africa, because I think there's this idea that the only true way to decolonize is to move back to Africa. And once you've done that, you're no longer like of a colonial mentality, which is completely incorrect. First of all, I think you can make a physical return whilst you're still in the West, like, because that could just be about finding your community, like maybe finding a diaspora community, or just a space where you feel safe. But it could also even be moving to somewhere in the Caribbean. It could be moving to Haiti. It could be moving somewhere else that's predominantly black. You know, it could be moving to Atlanta, moving to London from up north, you know. But I think the physical move, while it's very, very impactful for those who make it, I also think it's a very small part of the overall return. There is so much mental work to do in terms of like unlearning basically everything.
Like the things you didn't even know you needed to unlearn. And
exactly.
Like, yeah, it's a journey for sure.
Exactly. Especially when you make that physical return, because I feel like I've encountered a lot of people who moved to Ghana and they're just out here acting wild, just doing all the things that they ran away from white people doing to them. They're here doing to local Ghanaians. So there's a huge mental part of like unlearning coloniality, but also checking your own privilege, which a lot of black people don't like to do because a lot of black people don't think they have privilege.
Or it's their first time experiencing privilege.
Exactly. So there's the mental work, there's the emotional work of things like realizing the privilege that you have and how that feels when maybe you've come from somewhere where you didn't have the same privileges. Also the emotional work of like just understanding what it means to be Ghanaian, African American, like whatever you are, in different contexts. And also like understanding what it means to you, because I think for a lot of us, our identity is something that we have to keep rediscovering throughout our lives. And then there's the spiritual work of like whether you are Christian or Muslim or atheist or like quote unquote spiritual. I feel that when you start doing the work of returning to your heritage and connecting with your ancestors, that throws up all kinds of questions about your spirituality, whichever path you're on. So yeah, the return is real. Like, it's a lot of work.
You just said something, because I feel like I've been here, almost 5 years now. And I feel like the spiritual part is the part where I'm just like struggling maybe to like do in practice, right? Because I think one thing I realized, it's like, so the part of like decolonizing your mind, it's kind of from your environment, right? You can read about it and it's like, you know, you can have conversation about it. I think in terms of returning to source, when it's like in your spirituality and in your like religious practice, maybe not religion per se, but want for a better word, but like there's not a lot of resources about it, right? And what this person will tell you is not what this person will tell you. And I think for a majority of us that come from like Christian backgrounds, it's kind of like not only like feels like a little taboo when you're first going into it, but it's like there's a resistance. I feel like what was your journey like, and like how did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the reasons that it's so difficult is also one of the reasons it was so easy for Westerners to impose colonial rule. And that's because our indigenous spirituality is not something you can just write in a book. It's not something that is the same in every single part of Ghana or every single part of Africa. It's not formulaic in the same way that other organized religions are. And that has pros and it has cons, right? Because we have been conditioned to feel that if something is real or true or important or the right way, then it has a rule book that goes with it. Christianity has the Bible, Islam has the Quran, and then the Torah. Even yoga, like even one of the reasons that yoga has been so popular in the West, it also has the Bhagavad Gita, it has the Vedas. Like all of these different spiritual paths have these books that you can read and be like, okay, this was written 5,000 years ago, so like it must be true. Right? And also like it makes it easy to follow, like, oh, step 1, do this, step 2, don't do this. With indigenous spirituality, there's no books, like there's no guidebook, there's not even any like 10 commandments, it's not formulaic like that. So part of the difficulty is that it makes it hard to know what to do as an individual, but it also makes it very easy for, shall we say, false prophets to prey on people who are hungry, who are searching for that roadmap. You know, with indigenous spiritualities, like a lot of it is about connecting with your ancestors, connecting with your guardian spirits, connecting with nature. And so what I have to do to move forward in my path is going to look slightly different to what you have to do. It's going to look different to what you have to do. And so that means that it's not an individual journey, because community is really important, but it requires a lot more discernment from you as an individual, and also a lot more action and motivation from you as an individual. You know, if you're a Christian, you can just like go to church every Sunday and say that you're being a good Christian. Like you don't really have to, I mean, you should do more than that, but you can just go to church every Sunday and feel like you're moving forward in your spiritual life and you're just listening to someone else teach you. But indigenous spirituality doesn't really have that same kind of access. So to my personal spiritual journey, girl, I went all over the place. And I think this is something that happens to a lot of us who want to connect with African spirituality because of everything I mentioned earlier. So it started when I was in the UK. I was looking for anything, books, oracle decks, documentaries, like anything that could just give me some information. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I want to convert. I just wanted to learn. And there was hardly anything. Anything that I found was very heavily rooted in African American ideology. And there was a lot of information about Yoruba spirituality and also Candomblé, Santeria, the diasporan religions. Which was super interesting and useful still for me. But it still left questions like, okay, but what about like my ancestors? What about what was the Akan religion, you know? So that was part of what led me to come to Ghana, actually. And here I found all the cowboys, like people who were like, they could sense that energy, you know? I came so naive and so like searching, you know, I was really, really searching. And so I met teachers who maybe they did have some knowledge that was useful, but their intentions were not pure. You know, and since then I've seen other people like that, and I've seen people kind of falling into that trap, and I recognize it much more easily now. But at the time, you know, there's also this thing of like, oh, you know, I am going to be uncomfortable because I've been conditioned to think anything African spirituality is demonic or evil, which is true. But then it also leads you to sometimes doubt your own intuition of like, oh no, I'm only uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. And that definitely will come up. Like, there's a lot of things within our spirituality that feel uncomfortable because we've been taught that they're wrong.
I think for me, I feel like the lawlessness of it, because like if you're someone who has grown up in like a Christian household and you start to doubt things and like you obviously go through the phase of like maybe being an atheist and not believing in anything, and then you're like, okay, I want to get closer to my roots and maybe into traditional. I feel like there's almost like a, okay, so what are the rules? What, like, to everything you said? And more to it is like finding out that what is it that works for me. I think like traditional religion is like really intuitional. Like, is that a word?
It is now.
Intuitive. Yeah, it's really intuitive because it's like, it's about the earth, right?
Yeah.
Most of it is like connecting with yourself and the earth and the things that connect around you, right? Most time. But I think in that thing of like more as in practice, as in how like Christians will pray, Catholics will eat like, you know, the wine and the flesh, you know, people will go to the mosque, like that practice, it almost feels like what is supposed to be my practice, and it's that thing of learning what that is for you, and what that means for like the people that were before you, and unfortunately, like not a lot of us will get to know that because like it's been erased over time. If you're lucky enough to have like an old head that's like really still into it, I think we're in a place of like trying to navigate that and see what that looks like. But if we are not fortunate enough to have someone to like kind of lay the roads and be like, okay, so this is what we used to do, this is what our people used to do, and not lucky enough to go to like, let's say, the village and speak to it, like, you know, how do you navigate that? Because it's like, where do we start?
You know, I think one of the things is us not being so hung up on specifics. Like, you mentioned communion, like, okay, you take the bread, you take the wine, like it's very specific actions, right? But spirituality is all about symbolism. I don't think that the specifics of like, oh, do you eat this bread or this bread? I mean, I'm not talking about Catholicism specifically, I'm just using it as an example. I think a lot of the time those specifics don't matter as much as we think they do. So instead of trying to learn exactly what my great-great-great-great-great-grandma did when she wanted to invoke her ancestors or whatever, I think what's more important is to understand the values, understand like the basic makeup of a ritual, understand like the formula of how to create spiritual energy and how to direct it. And again, there's so many different ways to do that. So I think one of the things that we can take solace in is this idea of ritual. Ritual has been so important in our communities for so long. And, you know, there's going to be certain rituals that were done, even like naming ceremonies and stuff like that. There's specific ways of doing things. But those things change over time. And as long as the symbolism stays the same, as long as the intention stays the same, I don't think it matters if the specific actions are different, because tradition is supposed to evolve as times change. It's supposed to stay relevant, otherwise it dies out, which a lot of our traditions have. So for me, I think when I realized that connecting with my ancestors was the answer to everything, it helped me to feel less of that kind of searching energy. So like I connect with my ancestors, I speak with my ancestors, and I use ritual. I make my own rituals as long as I have the pure intention, and I might research things like, oh, what herb is good for this, what crystal is good for this. But aside from that, like we know a lot of the stuff because we see it in our cultural traditions. You know, now we like to separate religion and culture, but the truth is like there was never any separation before. It was just life. Like, you don't say like, oh, when I want to practice my religion, I do this thing, but when I'm just being cultural, I do this thing. Then when I'm with my family, I do this thing. Like, it was all together. So when we look at things like naming ceremonies, when we look at how we celebrate, how we do funerals, how we do weddings, we can pick up those little pieces of spirituality, whether it's wearing white for celebration, whether it's pouring libations, whether it's the way we treat our elders. All of those things are part of our traditional spirituality, even though now we might try and call them culture instead.
So you just said something, because I'm sure like some people are going to watch this episode and like Christian or something, they're going to be like, oh my God, like they're going to have, they're going to have their opinions.
Yeah.
I think something that's so interesting for me in like West African culture is like, if you go to South Africa, they might be Christian, but they're gonna go pray to their ancestors. They're gonna have a shaman. They're gonna have, like, they still practice that, and there's not really that much of a stigma about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I'm guessing it's in the way we were colonized in our experience, but like that struggle between like, you can't really straddle both.
Yeah.
Because like they see it as like religion and culture rather than like it's one and the same. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think Christianity dictates that other religions are false. So it's pretty much that. Like, Christianity is the one true religion, and like, you have to abscond all false gods. It's, a thing in the Bible that they say. So I think that's really where it came from. I think, like you were saying, there's so many different modalities. Like you mentioned Catholicism, like there's Anglicans, there's Protestants, there's Methodists, like there's all these different denominations of Christianity wherein there's so many different practices, but like you said, the rule book is the same. They're all following the Bible. It's just slightly different variations, and then some of the rituals are a bit different. Like Catholics are notorious for standing in church like constantly and kneeling exactly. Anglicans, it's kind of similar but less standing. You can say a bit more. But yeah, I think that's more so it. I also just think Christianity is the predominant religion in Ghana as we speak. It's like Islam and Christianity is number one, like over 70%, I believe, and then Islam is like 19, and then the traditional religions are more so within like rural communities, which is where like you really see them active. But depending on what tribe you're from, I think you can still. I'm kind of sad that Sally's not in this episode. It just occurred to me that Sally's a really good person to have to speak about like the intersection between culture and religion, because in Ghana culture, like there's still a lot of that practice of the ritual. I think in many of our tribal,
our culture
I think so too.
About tribes, there's still
I think
a lot
it
of
depends
that,
on. I think it depends on how close
you
individuals are to that tradition, and I think one of the great shames in our modern day is that there seems to be a conflation between like modernizing and westernizing. And so a lot of people think of themselves as like modernizing and moving forward, and that involves leaving behind tradition or leaving behind the villages, as people call it.
Like paganism.
Yeah. But coming back to the point about Christianity existing with traditional religions, yes, you're right that in Christianity you're supposed to, not worship lesser gods and smaller gods, as they like to call them. But there are a lot of people who are Christians who are going to the shrine and are working with traditional priests, but they do it behind closed doors. So I think a big part of it, in Ghana at least, is optics. I don't think it's that people are completely abandoning traditional religion. I think it's just that they don't want to be seen to be practicing it. I mean, there's even this thing that people say that most of the biggest churches here in Ghana were built and are being successful because the heads of those churches went to do rituals at the shrine, And so I think optics is part of it, because when you when you understand traditional religion, you let me not say understand because there's debate about it, but for me, traditional religion still answers to God. Like, there is one supreme God in traditional religion, the same way there is in Christianity. One of the big messages of colonial Christianity was that traditional religion is evil because it doesn't recognize the supreme being.
Yeah.
But that's completely incorrect. It's completely not factual. So that's not to say that Christianity and traditional religion necessarily go hand in hand. There are other areas where they might conflict. But if there's one thing I want people to know about indigenous religions is that they recognize one supreme God.
Yeah.
And that's a big lie that has been used to demonize those religions for a long time.
From my understanding.
But is that even a bad thing, even if they didn't?
It's not a bad thing. It's just that I feel that that particular line has been used to create a lot of division and a lot of misconceptions. And if that wasn't the case, maybe more people would be more open, not to practicing it necessarily. I don't think everyone should be practicing traditional religion, but I feel that there should be less fear around it, and I think there would be if that wasn't like the headline thing. Like, I remember I was speaking to, I think it was a relative, and they asked me if I went to church, and I was like, no, I'm not a Christian. And they were like, oh, are you Muslim? And I was like, no. And then they were like, oh, you're a non-believer. And I was like, is that the only other option?
That's
Christian,
crazy.
Muslim, or non-believer? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I believe in God, actually. And then I, like, explained my spirituality a little bit. And they were like, okay, yeah, so you're a non-believer. And I was like, okay.
But you're not, though. You're not. Because I feel, like, okay, so my understanding, like, Mawu is literally, like, God.
Yeah.
Mawu's
Sky
God.
God, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the ancestors are just basically, like, conduits between, like, that spiritual and this realm, right? So it's not that you don't believe in God, and you're saying, like, you're worshipping lesser gods even, but you're just like, I know there's, like, other ways to get to God, rather than just, like, you know, praying to him directly every day and doing their rituals.
Yeah, and you know, okay, so if we forget traditional religion for a moment and we just talk about ancestors, you can absolutely be Christian and revere your ancestors, because ancestral veneration is not about worshipping them. It's literally about having a relationship with them. And if anything, Christianity includes ancestral worship, because what is Jesus if he's not an ancestor? What are saints if they are not ancestors? Like, it's different cultural ways of understanding the same thing. From my understanding, there's nothing in Christianity that prevents you from having a relationship with the people who came before you. So if you forget every other aspect of traditional religion, forget the bosom, forget all of the rituals, just having a relationship with your ancestors, I think, is something that every African should have, no matter what religion you are.
Yeah, why so?
Why?
Yeah.
First of all, let me preface this by saying there's so many different ways to have a relationship with your ancestors. It doesn't mean you have to be, like, wearing white cloth and running around the bush doing rituals. Like, that's not the only way. It can literally be like having a photo of one of your late relatives somewhere in your house. It can literally be having a conversation with your parents to understand, like, oh, what did my grandparents do? What did my great-grandparents do? What were they like? A lot of us are named after someone. It can be speaking to the person who named you and finding out, okay, the person that you named me after, what were they like? Why did you choose that name? All of these things are a version of having a relationship with your ancestors. So I think it's important in general for anyone to have a relationship with their ancestors, because number one, I feel that one of the issues that a lot of us have is a lack of belonging, a lack of self-esteem, which leads into poor mental health, or just, like, not understanding your place in life or your purpose in life. And I think community can really help to remedy that, and ancestors are part of our community, they're part of our family. So when you start to build a relationship with your ancestors, it gives you so much information about who you really are and where you came from and what people have done before you, and therefore what maybe you could do as well.
Yeah,
I feel like
legacy.
it gives you information about their legacy. It gives you family as well. It gives you love. It expands all the good things you get from your living family, or at least the parts of your living family you get good things from. That's all expanded by connecting with your ancestors. Let me also say, when I say connecting with your ancestors, I don't mean everyone. The same way that your living family, you have relatives that you vibe with and you have relatives that you don't vibe with. You have relatives, you may be related to them, but it doesn't mean they're good people. It's the same with ancestors. This idea that just because someone died, they are now like a good spirit is false. So, also choose the ancestors you want to connect with.
I guess that's where that discernment comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think it's important to connect with ancestors for all of the same reasons it's important to have family, to have community. Even before you get into any of the spiritual elements of it, right? But then as Black people, I think it's even more important because a lot of the work that has been done to diminish us as a people and as individuals comes down to cutting our ties, cutting our connection to our heritage, cutting our connection to our traditions, cutting our connection to each other.
Yeah, and even migration, like
exactly
moving from where we come from to like cities like Accra and all of those things.
Exactly. So a lot of the work that we need to do as a global Black community is about reforming those ties with each other, with our traditions, with our heritage, and part of that is reforming our ties with our ancestors. For me, connecting with your ancestors, it gives you clarity, it gives you belonging, it gives you motivation, it gives you insight, and it also, in a way, gives you purpose, because the more you think about your ancestors, the more you think about your legacy and what you will be as an ancestor. Why will people call on you when you're not here anymore? Or why would they not call on you?
I guess I'm curious about your approach or your thought process with regards to local Ghanaians or like the average Ghanaian, because obviously the concept of, and I mean personally I'm not religious, so this is not a topic I'm too versed in, at least as far as like spirituality. I've dabbled here and there, but it's not my calling. But like with local Ghanaians who probably are more Christian adjacent, or just local Ghanaians in general, how or what is your approach? Because I think the spirituality, the concept of spirituality, there is a lot of like Western, you know what I mean, like spirituality and the concept of it in mainstream media and like recently is like very Western, or like even if it's rooted in African ideology, the concept of like that type of practice. Because when I think of the way traditional religions are practiced here, it, like you said, it's very much just ingrained in who they are, in like what they do. And I mean, I don't know, I've never practiced a traditional religion, so I can't say, but just going off of what I see, and a few encounters, I don't really know what my question is, but like I don't know, like how would you approach like a local Ghanaian who is, let's say, a Christian, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I get what you mean.
Yeah, let's
try.
But
me, the approach is the same. The conversations I have are similar, whether I'm speaking to a local Ghanaian or someone who grew up outside. The main difference might be when talking about decolonization, not because local Ghanaians don't need decolonization, but because it has a different context than someone who grew up in a predominantly white country. If anything, I find that my conversations with local Ghanaians are, what's the word? Like the things I'm talking about are actually more familiar, because when I talk about traditional, well, first of all, I'm not a traditionalist, so I'm not usually trying to like convert people to become traditionalists. What I'm usually trying to do is express how we can connect with traditional practices as part of our spirituality and well-being. So usually when I speak to anyone, I'll talk about things like herbal healing, I'll talk about things like connecting with our ancestors, I'll talk about ritual, and those things are actually more familiar to local Ghanaians than they are to diasporans, because so many Ghanaians use traditional medicine, even if they are Christian. Like it's just another path for healing. Ritual, like a lot of us have encountered ritual more so than people who grew up in the UK and see it as part of culture more than as part of spirituality. The most tricky part is ancestors, and that's the same whether I'm talking to someone who grew up in Ghana or someone who grew up in the UK. That seems to be the part that has the most resistance, which is why I always explain that I'm not telling people to worship their ancestors. I'm literally just telling you to connect with them. And like I said earlier, that can be just finding out who they are. So when I speak to people who are born and bred in Ghana, I actually find that what I'm saying lands a little easier when it's things like herbal healing and creating your own rituals, because it's more familiar. But then talking about things like the oracle cards, I find that depending on the generation of the person I'm talking to, I might talk about them in a different way. If I start talking to like my uncles and aunties about divination, then there will be issues, you know? But if I start from the point of, I wrote the guidebook so people can understand Adinkra better, and then you can just pull a card, and then I build up to, and you know, maybe like if you have a question and you're looking for spiritual guidance, then you can pull a card. Then it lands better. Whereas if I'm talking to someone who grew up in the US and probably has had oracle cards before, then that conversation is a little bit different.
And then the difference, or like the distinction between traditionalism and spirituality, right? Like, because I think that's what I'm trying to, maybe what I'm trying to get at, maybe. Because not to separate them, but almost like traditionalism, obviously when you look at it, it's like you can say it's spiritual, but do people who practice traditional religion sort of feel like or embody that same spirituality?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
because
a really
traditionalism is really, to a certain extent, like there is a bit of a rule book type of thing. You know what I mean? Like if you're a traditionalist, you do XYZ,
100%.
blah, 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 blah. Like,
that's a really good point. So there is definitely a big difference between practicing traditional religion and just being spiritual and like rooted in African spirituality.
Right.
Traditional religions are religions. They have rules. They might not have the book, they might not have the Bible that you can go to. Actually, some of them use the Bible, but that's a whole different conversation. They might not have the book that you can go read what to do, but they have rules, like very strict rules. So you can't just come and be like, okay, I'm a traditionalist now. Like, you have to actually be initiated. You have to understand your taboos. You have to understand like how you have to change your diet, what days you have to do certain things. Like, it's very strict, the same way every religion is actually. But if you are spiritual and your spirituality is rooted in African philosophy and African spirituality, that's a different thing. So I think that's definitely something important for people to understand. African traditional religions include like Vodun or Ifa, the Yoruba religion, and then the diasporan religions as well. But they are not the same as saying, oh, I practice African spirituality. Practicing African spirituality is choosing not to have a religion, but still believing, like still having faith, and just doing it rooted in African philosophies and African cosmology.
Got it.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah, no, it was a good answer. It's a good distinction. So it's almost like the modern day version of traditionalism in a way. Like it's not a religion. It's more of a
way of
you could say religion is a lifestyle. There's a lot of intersections, but I get the understanding, because like the modern, man, woman, they, them is maybe not necessarily going to want to abscond everything and go live in a village and practice the traditionalism in that very conservative, for lack of a better word, or like traditional way.
And conservative is a good way to describe it, actually, because I think there's this fantasy that like, oh, African religions aren't like other religions, but they are. They're dogmatic, and they are conservative in certain ways. So, this ideal that a lot of diasporans have about like, oh, I'm going to go get initiated in this religion, it's like a very serious thing. Yeah. It's the same way if someone just who has never been Christian before is like, oh, I'm going to go get baptized. Like, it's very serious, and it has to be taken seriously. It's not a fad. Yeah. But also, you might not like that religion. Like, there's a lot of, within these religions, they're still very patriarchal. Even African traditional religions can be very patriarchal. So no one should feel that by going to an African religion, they're like shunning all of the things they didn't like about Christianity or Islam. You're probably going to find the same things. People who are looking for something more intuitive and more less patriarchal are most likely going to find themselves on a spiritual path rather than a religious path. Yeah.
So what would you say is your thinking or your approach to people like me who are pretty much completely non-religious, somewhat non-spiritual? I mean, if you think of, or if we, define spirituality as, like you said, just sort of charting your own path and finding your own meaning, but it's not rooted in any sort of ideology or religion, maybe an ideology like a philosophy or like a personal belief system type of thing, but not necessarily like a traditional practice or a religion or anything like that. What are you saying?
Okay, tell me a bit more. Like,
I guess just like the concept, like I think the spirituality for me is neither, like anything, is neither good nor bad. It just is what it is, you know what I mean? And it depends on the individual. It depends on the modality being used. I choose not to utilize the label, even though it can be somewhat applicable as far as like I am someone who chooses to find meaning in life and purpose in my life and like create my own belief systems. The reason I choose not to label myself as spiritual is I think really because of what I perceive it to denote, which at least as far as I view people who practice spirituality, it does tend to be rooted in something other than yourself, which and not in like the sense of like community, like in a supreme being, for instance, or some concept of some greater power, you know what I mean? And I mean, like, so things like that where like I don't believe in that. And so I don't, like, in a way I see spirituality sort of similar to religion. Not the same, but sort of similar. You know what I mean? And the concepts of or at least I think for me the biggest thing is I I always think about the fact that what does the world look like when people are just rooted in themselves and their communities without the concepts of something else. You know, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. So
self-determinism, I guess.
Yeah. So your question is, what would I say to you?
Yeah, I was just like,
okay,
are we
well,
good?
Yeah,
I know,
oh
obviously,
my
like
gosh.
we're good, but just like
What I would, if we were not on this podcast, I would just like keep asking you questions to understand more, because even from the little that you've explained to me, I know you don't use the label spirituality, but you sound spiritual to me.
Yeah.
And for me, spirituality, it's not like, I think one of the big issues we have in the world is understanding. Like, I think we use a lot of different words to express the same meaning, but because there's so much attached to those words, we often think we're talking about different things, or maybe we understand them as different things. Yeah. So to me, like, yes, I believe in a higher power. But someone who tells me they only believe in their intuition, to me, that's the same thing. Like, I understand it as the same thing. It's not the same thing in that, like, if you only believe in your intuition, you're not going to be there praying to your intuition, like, hey, dear intuition, you know?
dear intuition.
Dear intuition.
What do I do?
Yeah, but to me, someone who is driven by intuition, driven by a sense of duty, a sense of purpose, to me, that is still someone who is spiritual. There are people who believe in absolutely nothing, like they don't believe in intuition, they don't believe in a higher power, they believe that the world is just here, like that plant is just a plant, you're just a person, there's nothing more to it. And honestly, for me, I have what I believe, but that doesn't make me right. And I think that's also one of the reasons that religion doesn't sit well with me, because a big part of religion is you have to, in believing what you believe, you have to, I don't know how to express it, but there's a sense of judgment.
Think everyone else is wrong.
Is wrong, yeah. Whereas for me, I feel like I have what I believe, and I believe it to be true, and I believe that other people's beliefs lead them to a similar truth, and that I can't see everything. So I believe what's right for my path, and other people are on their own path, and there is more to the world, the universe, spirituality than my tiny human brain can ever fathom. So even though I don't agree with someone who says there is no meaning to anything, there is no energy, I don't agree, but I don't think that I know better than them, or I know something they don't know. I just think they're on a different path, and we don't align, but there's a reason that they have those beliefs and that they're on that path. I don't think that describes you, because it sounds like you do believe in something. It's
Depends
just
on
not
the
something
day.
you would call God.
I feel
on the day.
like, without you knowing, I feel like the way you live your life is very
I don't like the label, I abscond.
Exactly.
No,
And I
not
think
the
that's what
label,
it
as
is.
in, I think the way
you are spiritual,
Yeah.
but you don't identify with the label, and I think that's more a commentary on the word itself and what it's come to mean, rather than a commentary on you.
Yeah, which is why I wouldn't label myself it.
Yeah.
I even feel like mindfulness is even more like,
I mean, what I was gonna
or
say, I feel
intentionality.
like
There's other words for me.
Yeah.
Like, I live an intentional life. I live a meaningful life. I don't live
Yeah.
a spiritual life.
yeah, I feel like the way you move through life and the way like you treat plants and like your little
Plants.
no like
What do I do with
you're like your
plants,
little
girl?
practices in the way like you treat animals, like as in plants, as in like agriculture, and how you think about food and how
That's
you think
just
about
us been doing with
Us
plants.
not dying.
no, not really, because like someone could be like spiritual as hell and doesn't.
If all our basic needs were met, I think I just live my life and be free.
Yeah, but like
I
you're
just-
very intentional with like when it comes to like food and the sources the food comes from,
So
and
I
how
wanna
the
die.
food reacts.
It's not spiritually based.
I'm not saying it's
just health.
spiritually based, but I'm saying that like in other, someone could view it as spiritually based because it's very off the earth. Like it's very much
I
of
think
like,
that's what
and I
I
won't label
don't-
that
I
for
don't-
you,
I don't
but like I'm
like.
just saying it's like
Yeah.
very much like it's grounded. That's what I'm trying to say. It's very grounded, and whatever that's grounded in or isn't grounded into you, then that's fair
That's
enough.
what I mean, like like the spirit. You know what I mean? Like, oh, because I care about agriculture, or like ensuring that we're not eating foods with too many chemicals and them UPFs. That doesn't mean I'm spiritual. That just means like care about.
It can be
Yeah.
very
It's just
like practical.
Yeah, it's like a practical thing. So when that is put on me, I get a bit like,
Yeah.
no, like I'm not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not and I don't think it's everyone, but I think like the certain sector spirituality which sees things through a very like soulful or like spirit based, you know, sort of otherworldly lens is what I'm like. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just living with intention of recognizing that if we pollute our earth, we're all gonna die.
Right.
Very like that is what I'm.
And I think, I don't know how you're going to take this, but I think that's also one of the things that is such a big part of indigenous spirituality, is that it's actually just living, not like a dickhead, basically.
Yeah, living
like,
intentionally.
It's living in alignment with the people around you. It's living in alignment with the planet. Yes, like a lot of them have specific rituals that they do, but when you get behind the meaning of a lot of these rituals, like sometimes it's literally just like planting seeds, but there's a ritual around it, you know? Like a lot of it is actually just taking everyday activities and just giving them some weight, because if you don't plant the seeds, then we won't have food, and then we won't grow as a community. So it's just giving it some importance rather than just like chucking the seeds in the ground, you know? And then over time, that has turned into spirituality. So I think, I'm not saying you're spiritual, don't worry. I'm not saying you're spiritual. But I think one of the things that I learned on my journey is that African spirituality, or certain ways of practicing African spirituality, is like so normal. Like, I think we can get into this idea that like, oh, I'm going to go to a ritual and I'm going to see someone enter a trance, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And like, there are some rituals I've attended where like, we literally just went, drank some home brewed beer, they played drums, we danced, and we went home. And like an older version of me would be like, oh, that wasn't like spiritual enough, you know, it wasn't, nothing happened. But like, that's actually what indigenous spirituality is. It's just living in a way where you're connected with your community, you're connected with the earth around you, and that's where the spiritual energy comes from. It's just living life in an intentional way.
Yeah.
But you're not spiritual.
I'm interested in your take when it comes to like music and that, because like I'm sure that's part of it. Like, you're a DJ. She's a really good DJ, by the way. Sick DJ.
Thank you.
And like, what is that? Like, how does that translate? What kind of music do you listen to actually when like you're trying to practice?
Okay, like the music I play.
The music you play.
Wait, do you mean, when you say practice, do you mean like
Like
when I'm preparing for a set, or?
No, like just in general, in terms of like, okay, I'm guessing like you give me a person who has like multiple like in terms of like when you're trying to practice, in terms of like you're introverted, maybe you're trying to get like to a more centered place. Then when it's like expressing joy, like what is your vibe with that?
That's a really good question. It changes all the time. It's very dynamic. So right now, silence is my vibe when I'm trying to meditate or something like that, because there's just so much sound in my life right now, like obviously DJing, but then also being a mother, like there's just noise all the time. So if I'm trying to meditate, at the moment, silence is what I value. A previous time in my life, it would have been like, I really like kora music, like from Senegal. It's a very kind of meditative West African / North African kind of vibe. the kora is basically like a traditional string instrument, mostly from like Senegal, Gambia, Mali, and it's just such a spiritual sound. It's incredible. And then at a different time in my life, maybe more lo-fi music. A different time in my life, I was listening to Hindu mantras. Like, it really just depends.
I went through that phase.
Yeah, we all go through that phase.
I went through that.
But honestly, I think there comes a point where you realize that music is everywhere. Like, music is an expression of life. So even when there's silence, there's still music somewhere. Like, whether it's the sound of your heart beating, or like the wind, or the birds singing outside. We have this idea that we created music, but we didn't. Music is in nature, and then we just found a way to like express it through our own instruments. So for me, honestly, any type of music can be spiritual, because it's the essence, the energy of music itself that is the spiritual thing, not necessarily like the lyrics or
Do you know what I find oddly spiritual? Bashment music.
Really?
Like a certain type of bashment music, right? Because I feel like a lot of the time, like the beats of it, and also like it's just very joyful.
Yeah.
And it like makes you want to move your body
100%.
a lot of the times. And
100%.
I'm just like, oh, that is just like pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
Which I'm here for.
Right. And you know, I think like one of the things that we also forget is, going back to this thing we were talking about, rituals. The most basic ritual is like a drum, and then you're just dancing and losing yourself in the music. Like, that's one of the most spiritual things ever. So even when we're looking at like raves and like going out dancing, like there's a reason that if you approach the night in a certain way, you feel such a like energetic release, and you feel joyful and you feel connected. So yeah, that drum beat is ancestral. Like it's literally like it moves your spirit.
Yeah.
You know? So
there's this lady, do you know who I'm going to talk about? That thing that person has sent you of like, you have to, the mapuka thing. So
I don't know.
Dance
for me?
No.
Oh.
No, I don't know if anyone has seen this lady on the internet. Like, I actually see more content of her, and like she is flexible as hell. Yes. She's like, she does like these yoga poses where like, I'm not even joking, she literally has like the back of her foot behind like her back or her neck or something. Like, she is super flexible and like very grounded in like, this pose is for this and this is like, you know, she takes you through her practice. But she had this viral video come out where she was basically like just twerking the whole time, and she was talking, and she was just like, I want you to know that if you're stressed or if you're feeling a type of way, you just need to mapuka. Like, you basically just need to twerk it out. You need to shake your ass.
Yeah.
And at the time, like, it was like, when you watch the video, you're kind of like, this is kind of silly, but it's actually so real.
It
like,
is.
It's like peak girlhood, because you can be like having a cry and then look at a mirror and be like, and it's like, it's actually like,
It's
makes you feel better.
Yeah. It's a thing, because I feel like the wellness scene, or like the wellness world, went through this phase of like, to be well, you have to like sit and cross your legs and meditate and not move a muscle. And of course that is something, right? But especially if you're African, the kind of release that is in our DNA is movement, is dance, and that is another form of meditation. It's another form of energy work. And to your point of twerking, like, twerking comes from traditional African dancing. Like, obviously it's been sexualized and whatever now, but it aligns with both yoga and Western somatics and psychology that say that a huge portion of trauma and energetic and emotional blockage is locked in your hips. So yeah, you can go to like so many different thought trains and like spiritual practices, and you'll see that they pinpoint the hips as being the place where especially women store most of their trauma. So whether you go to a yoga class or a massage therapist, like medical massage, or an energy healer, or there's another one that's not coming to me, but there's also this thing called somatic therapy, where you're having talking therapy and then they're also giving you specific movements to do. And so much of those practices focuses on your hips because that's where the energy gets trapped. So this thing of like twerking it out, like it's actually
real.
a thing.
Yeah, it's so real.
It's a thing.
It's so real. I feel like also in like our dances, a lot of the times, I remember when I was younger, like I used to really like to dance, right? And like my grandma, she would like teach me like the abaja and stuff. But there's like also different dances. And there's a lot where you kind of have to like shake your ass a little bit, and like they'd be like, "Don't do that," and I'm just like, I'm just shaking my ass. But like if you actually know, like a lot of it is that like that energetic release and like celebration and expression through like moving our hips and like moving our body, which is so beautiful. I actually want to talk about the cards.
Yes, let's talk about the cards.
Okay, so Araba kindly gifted us some oracle cards. They're so beautiful.
Thank you.
Come with a cover cloth, and they also come with a guidebook on how to use the cards in whichever way like you feel comfortable to. What's in the guidebook, by the way?
So every card has a description, and then just like an action or an activity that can help you to connect with the meaning of the card.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was even going to ask earlier, because I was like, what's the difference between a tarot deck and an oracle deck?
Yeah, so tarot is a specific set of cards. Like every tarot deck has the same cards. So it has the Fool, it has like the archetypes, which is like the Fool, the
Major Arcana,
Empress,
Minor.
exactly. So any tarot deck has to have those cards, otherwise it's not tarot. Whereas an oracle deck it can be any theme, it can have any number of cards. It's is completely up to the person who created them. Both cards are, depending on how you use them, are a tool for divination. So, when people think of divination in the African context, you might think of maybe like going to a traditional priest and them throwing some cowries or like drawing something in some flour. Like that's the traditional style of divination. But when Africans were taken to the Americas, they were not allowed to practice these things. So they had to find different ways of preserving some of these practices. And one of those ways was using playing cards for divination, because from the outside looking in, it just looks like they're playing a card game. But they were actually using them as tools of divination. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit and explain what divination is, people will say it's like fortune telling, but it's not necessarily that. It's basically communicating with the divine and drawing out messages from that communication. So, a cynic might look at it and say, for example, if you pull a card and you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what's going on in my life right now. A cynic might say, oh yeah, that's confirmation bias because you just read it and you thought about what's going on in your life. But like, isn't that actually the same thing?
Yeah,
like,
we're not just manifesting our realities.
It's basically the same result. Like whether you see it as this was the message you needed to see, so that's the message that God sent you through the cards, or you see it as your subconscious bringing something up because you saw the card. Like, at the end of the day, the result is the same. You received a message that hopefully will help you work through something in life. So yeah, that's basically divination. Like I said, they started using playing cards for it, and then that developed into the tarot and the oracle cards that we use today.
Okay. So, speaking of her oracle cards, they are so beautifully illustrated, by the way. They have they have the English, and then they have the tree meaning of what the cards are, and they are so nice. Like,
so one of the reasons I created these was because almost all the oracle decks I found were just very Western and very Eurocentric. All of the images were of white people. And I told you I was like, before I came to Ghana, I was running around looking for anything African. The only oracle deck I found that was African was themed on Isis, the ancient Egyptian goddess. And even in that, she was like white tanned skin. So I had always wanted to create something like that could be used as a spiritual tool or just for inspiration. Like, you don't have to use it in the way where you're connecting to the divine or whatever. It can literally just be, oh, what card will I pick today and what message does it have for me? Or, oh, I want to learn more about the Adinkra, let me get this, and then just read through them and learn the meanings of the Adinkra.
It's beautiful. So if someone wanted to get these, where would they get them?
They would message me on Instagram. There's only a few left. I need to print a new batch soon. But yeah, they can just message me on Instagram.
Okay. Thank you so much, Araba, for joining us. Is there anything you want to tell anyone, like any projects you're coming up, or like where to get the book, etc., etc.?
Oh, okay. So what do I want to tell people? You can get my book, if you're in Ghana, you can get it from Vidya Bookstore. If it's sold out, they can order it specially for you. If you want my oracle deck, you can hit me up on Instagram.
What's your Instagram?
It is at araba.oa. And if you want to enjoy some energetic release by dancing the night away, you can follow my music organization at Transit Fest. And I think that's all the things.
Okay, you heard her. Thank you so much to Tenika as well, and to GCR for basically helping us and putting the shit together. Follow GCR on GCR podcast, Gold Coast Report on Instagram and all social networks. Follow Sankasa podcast on Instagram and Sankasa on TikTok. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye. Bye.